Hello everyone and welcome back to another Explain video. Today we're going to be starting off with something a little bit different. Today I thought I would take you guys into my virtual classroom and explain something a little bit kind of behind the curtains of flying. So, flying in clear blue skies when the sun is shining is very easy, but sometimes the weather doesn't always cooperate. So you have to rely on what are called instrument approaches to get into certain airports. So today I'm going to peel back the curtain and show you guys what an ILS is, what it means, how it works, and how to fly one. So off to the right hand side of the screen here we can see this little map looking thing, and what this is called is an approach plate. This gives us all the information that we need on how to fly an approach. So this, for example, is one of my home airports in Tacoma, Washington. We can see it's Tacoma Narrows. So we'll start at the top and kind of break our way down. So as we can see, Tacoma, Washington, and then we'll start from the left. So first what we see here is LOC and then ITIW. So we'll start off with LOC. So LOC stands for Localizer. Now what a localizer does is it normally sits at the bottom, or at the end of the runway, and then it projects a radio signal out on this path here, so that the airplanes can track that radio signal and fly in for guidance left and right. So, and then we see ITIW. That's what's the identifier. So when you tune in a frequency, it'll give you the identifier for that certain frequency, and we know when we have the localizer tuned in correctly, it'll display ITIW. And then the frequency for the ILS is 109.1. Approach course is pretty simple. That's the course in magnetic heading that you need to fly. And we can also find that on this arrow that's pointing down into the runway of 167. I'll skip over this box that's more complicated than I would like to go into today. And then we'll move over to the right. So ILS or LOC are now, runway 17. So what is an ILS? ILS stands for Instrument Landing System, and it helps us pilots land when the weather is suboptimal, when there's clouds or rainy, or whenever the weather would prohibit us just from landing visually. So we can see that it's the Instrument Landing System, ILS, or the Localizer approach to runway 17 into Tacoma Narrows Airport. So that means this approach is capable of either flying the Localizer, which is just left and right guidance, or the ILS, which is left and right and then also up and down vertical guidance. So I'm just going to skip over most of this. I'll try not to get too fine of detail, but I'll first of all start off with the map. So as I explained earlier, this localizer right here, as we can see, it's pointing right down here, is 109.1 on the frequency, and it's ITIW, which is transmitting out in a cone off of the end of the runway. So ILS's, or instrument landing systems, capture normally within roughly 10 to 15 nautical miles depending on the equipment of the airplane. So as soon as you're within, like I said, 10 to 15 nautical miles, normally you can start picking up that radio frequency and start guiding yourself in. So typically what will come in, what will come alive first, and what I mean by come alive is there is a instrument in the airplane that allows us to see when the ILS or when the localizer is aligned and we are inbound on the proper course. So when I say the instrument comes alive, that means that the the pointing arrow, which tells us if we're too far left, too far right, or too high or too low, is starting to move, which means that it's starting to pick up that localizer that's transmitting. So the first thing that will come alive is the localizer. If you're coming in from the left, it will start out fully right, and then as you start to come in, it'll swing to the middle, and vice versa if you're coming in from the left. So generally, as you're flying in, you normally are about a 30-degree intercept angle ish. That's 30 degrees of magnetic heading off of 167, the final approach course in this case. So the localizer comes alive, it swings to the middle, and then you start either a left or a right-hand turn to match this final approach course as the localizer starts to come alive. Then the vertical guidance, typically you start below the vertical guidance path, and then the ILS, you can see what's called a glide slope. So localizer is left and right, glide slope is up and down. You can see the glide slope is above you, and then it slowly starts to come down until you capture it, and then it starts to descend along, coupled with the glide slope. So moving down here, we can see this is kind of a vertical drawing of what I was explaining. So we start inbound here, and let's take Sen, for example. So Sen is a waypoint. Waypoints, they're all over the world. They're a set 5 letter combination of different waypoints, but instead of putting in the GPS coordinates, it's just a waypoint, much simpler. So as we can see here, Sen is right here on our map, and that's 5 nautical miles from the final. So we can see here at Sen, there's this 2,000, and then you can see this little cross right here. So that is where the glide slope intercept should happen, which means that you should be at Sen at 2,000 feet to intercept the glide slope properly. And then at roughly Sen is when your glide slope will come alive, you'll capture it, and then you will start to descend to capture that glide path. And then down here is a big table for what's called the minimums. So that's weather requirements. So for example, these are different types of approaches. Like for example, if you're only doing the localizer approach, this is the height minimums, and then if you're only doing the ILS, these are the height minimums. So for our case of today, we are flying the ILS to runway 17, and our minimums are 494 feet and 1/2 statute mile of visibility. And with that, let's get into the sim. Alright, so here we are, everyone, back in X-Plane 11. So I just explained to you how a ILS works, and now I'm going to be demonstrating how you fly an ILS. So I'm going to go ahead and the autopilot is currently in heading select, which means that I can adjust the magnetic course of whatever heading I want. So I'm going to go ahead and turn my, you can see that orange selector moving around on the little instrument that tells me what my current heading is, and also what my selected heading is. So I'm going to go ahead and get pointed northbound and start heading away from the airport, just so I can get a little bit better spacing before I start to come in on the ILS. Alright, so I'm going to say that's alright. Now we've got a little bit extra spacing. So, like I said, ILSs are typically an intercept heading of around 30 degrees. So we know our final approach course is right about there, so we'll say our intercept heading is about a heading of 220. So this is that instrument that I was talking about with the needles that move left and right and then up and down here. So we'll start, actually we overflew, so that means that we are no longer on the left side of the ILS, we're on the right side. So we're going to go and take our heading selector and spin us around the other way, as we just flew through the localizer, but that's quite alright. So I'm going to go and pull the power back just to help us along here, and I'm going to start a gentle descent because now we're going to be just a little bit above the localizer, or excuse me, above the glide slope. So I'll go ahead and get the approach armed on the autopilot, and now we're watching these fingers come in. So this swinging one right here is our localizer, and then this middle one is our glide slope. So as we can see on our map here, here's Sen, as we were discussing earlier. And here comes our needle. So this is what I was talking about when it comes alive. And now we can see our airplane is making a right-hand turn to intercept this localizer. Beautiful. Alright. So now the airplane made that right-hand turn to correct back on course, and now it's just making sure that that center needle is staying centered and to make sure that we are safely inbound on the localizer. Now here comes the glide slope. We'll go ahead and level out here to let the glide slope catch up to us. So we're level at about 1,300 feet. The little hand is the thousands of feet, and then the bigger hand is the hundreds of feet. So we're at 1,000, actually about 1,350 feet. And as I was saying, alright, doesn't look like the autopilot wants to cooperate, so we'll go ahead and hand fly this one. So our autopilot did a fantastic job of getting us captured on the localizer, but it didn't feel like descending. So I'll just go ahead and manually take over. I'm manually flying the airplane now. I'm starting to get the airplane pitched over a little bit extra to compensate for the fact that we're above the glide slope right now. I'm going to pull out the throttle to help us fall faster because there's less power helping us along. And as we can see, that glide slope is coming up, and now that we've got those two sticks centered in that little ball in the middle, that means that we are established on the localizer, and established on the ILS, the Instrument Landing System, and we are good to continue. Got a little bit low, so we'll just go and level it out, and there we go. We are perfect on the ILS. So typically you'd have the autopilot be flying this, but like I said, it wasn't working, but it's good to get hand flying in. You know, with most of the big airplanes now, you take off, you turn on autopilot, and then you leave it on for the next 2 or 3 hours, however long your flight is, and then you disengage autopilot to land. So it's good practice to get to hand fly the airplane. The approach speed in this Cessna 152 is about 65 knots, as we can see here in our ASI, or airspeed indicator. So we're just about 70 right now, and there's 75. Again, we're just tracking that ILS, and here is 500 feet. As we can see, the big hand is on the 5. And as I was discussing earlier, that would be our minimums. And minimums are how low you can go until you can land. So, for example, you can continue on this ILS approach all the way down to 500 feet. But if you don't have ground contact, if you don't have contact with the runway by 500 feet, you have to go around and then either try a different approach or go somewhere else. So now I'm just going completely visual. I'm slowly pulling the power off to help let us slow down, and I'm just initiating my flare, starting to let that stick back and just holding that sight picture, and I'm just letting the airplane kind of land itself almost. And there's touchdown. Beautiful. Go and get it corrected back on center line. We'll go ahead and pull the flaps up. Alright, and there you have it, an explanation and a tutorial on how to shoot an ILS. I'm sorry that the autopilot wasn't working, but it was good practice to get some hand flying in. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate your time. Please be sure to like and subscribe, and leave me a comment down below what you think. And please, if you think of anything that I can improve on, please let me know. I'm really looking forward to hearing from you down below. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.